Federal agents spent hours today first searching the home and then the office of President Trump's first-term National Security Advisor John Bolton. After he was forced out in late 2019, Bolton became a frequent critic of the president. In 2020, he wrote a book in which the administration tried to block, also launching an investigation into whether he disclosed classified information, an investigation that had been outwardly dormant until now. Today's search is apparently part of that probe. Meantime, the president, who campaigned in part on a promise of retribution against perceived enemies, said that he was not involved in the decision to search Bolton's premises.
I don't want to know about it. It's not necessary. I could know about it. I could be the one starting it. I'm actually the chief law enforcement officer, but I feel that it's better this way.
We should add that whether or not the president was involved, the searches were done in accordance with warrants approved by a court acting on evidence presented by federal authorities. Joining us now to discuss, former counsel to the Assistant Attorney General for National Security, Carrie Cordero, also former Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger, and back with us, former FBI Special Agent Asha Rangappa. Carrie, first to you, what would prompt DOJ to reopen this case into Bolton, and what bar would need to be met for a judge to sign off on a search warrant?
Yeah, Boris, I think that's the big question is what's the new piece of information that would have prompted either the reopening or if this investigation never was formally closed, which I haven't yet seen which way it was, whether it was formally closed to reopen it in this way. So obviously a search is a pretty significant step in an investigation. I think normally it would come later in the investigation. And my sense of it is, given that the prior investigation was based on information that he put in a book he published, that was several years ago. So I'm inclined to think that there was some new piece of information that then would have prompted this new, really, really significant investigative activity. And the FBI would have had to present with the Justice Department facts demonstrating probable cause that a crime was being committed or was about to be committed. And so that would have gone to a judge. Judge would have found probable cause. And so unless normal procedures were not followed in this particular incident, the FBI would have had to get court approval to be able to engage in this search of his residence and his office.
Asha, on the question of timing, what does the fact that they executed this search warrant now tell you about the stage that the investigation is currently in?
Well, as Carrie said, normally a search warrant would be executed in the later stages of an investigation because in your affidavit that you present showing probable cause, you're showing all of the evidence that you've gathered so far, and you're saying, listen, we have something that we know we can find in this specific place. So, that to me tells me that this is towards the end. I think that the judicial check here, on the one hand, gives us maybe some confidence that there was, an impartial branch that's making sure due process is followed. I think the tough part here is that despite the sound that you showed that Trump said, he doesn't know anything about this, and that's what we would ordinarily want to hear from a president, that's really not the way this FBI and DOJ has operated with this administration. And there's been a lot of coordination. And so it creates at least the appearance that this is, that there is some political motivation. And I think that is what makes this more concerning and complicated.
Congressman Kinzinger, whether intended to punish Bolton or based on actual evidence that a crime was committed, I imagine you think this is going to have a chilling effect on the president's critics, yourself possibly included.
Well, it's not going to on me. It makes me want to double down. But yeah, some do. And that's the point of it is, look, here's the thing. Will John Bolton be convicted of a crime? I would wager everything no. But simply having his house searched, and by the way, we don't know who the judge is. We don't know where the judge, we don't know what they presented, of course. Simply having his house searched actually makes him, in the news, makes him look guilty. And this is the goal here. It's to try to so people are just like, I'm gonna back out from this. I'm not gonna speak out against the president. You see this in other news networks when they kind of tamp down their stories. So yeah, I think that's the intention here. And look, this is the time when people need to not be intimidated. Because when you're intimidated, how many law firms have settled with Trump? How many universities have settled with Trump? The very bulwarks of the thing that are supposed to defend us. This is when it's important to double down. And I also want to mention, I saw that soundbite with Trump where he has a Trump was right about everything hat. Like, how tacky is that? It's just tacky. And by the way, the fact that they say this is an issue and they're going after John Bolton, assuming it's real, which I don't think so, they're admitting then that Donald Trump's mishandling of classified information was not a witch hunt. It, in fact, was worthy of the FBI and DOJ's attention.
I want to play for you something else that President Trump said about this. Let's watch.
My house was raided also, called Mar-a-Lago. They went through everything they could, including my young son's room and my wife's area. They went through her drawers, as the expression goes. They went through everything you can imagine. And when she came back, she said, she's very neat, you know, she's meticulous. And she looked and she said, whoa, this wasn't the way that she had it. So, you know, so I know the feeling. It's not a good feeling.
The president brought up the comparison to the search at Mar-a-Lago unprompted. How much of this do you think is just payback?
I mean, I personally think all of it's payback. Again, I mean, I think it's obvious. Kash Patel's statement, you know, nobody's above the law, mimicking exactly what was said about Donald Trump. You know, Pam Bondi, by the way, called herself Trump's lawyer. So, yeah, I think this is all payback. I think in time we'll see that.
And Kerry, if there is a legitimate case to be brought against Bolton, do you think that Trump may have undermined it because he's promised retribution against those who've crossed him?
Certainly, if John Bolton were actually prosecuted for something, he would raise that in the course of his own defense. But at this stage, you know, just seeing the search warrant, I just have so many factual questions about the nature of what would lead to this pretty dramatic event. I mean, John Bolton was National Security Advisor to President Trump. He also hasn't had a security clearance since President Trump revoked it in January of this year. And it seems very unlikely to me that he would actually be so unsophisticated as to keep classified documents in his house. So I just have a lot of questions about what type of access to information he would have had at this point, not having a clearance anymore, why that would be in documents potentially in his house such that a judge would authorize the search of his house. And I have a lot of questions about, you know, then what is it that they were really after? Did they seize devices? So I think at this stage, there's just so many factual questions about how they got to this point in the investigation.